Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2016 Christmas horror movie from Australia, Red Christmas. A few days ago I did Black Christmas, and I'm going to be doing at some point the remake of Black Christmas, but today it's Red Christmas. This was a movie that had a fairly low budget, and interestingly enough, it didn't suffer from the same problems, in my opinion, than typical low-budget horror movies do. However, it did suffer from some pretty major identity crises. And to go into more detail of this one, so I can get into the review of this, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. This one followed the family that the main character of Diane, played by Dee Wallace, was the matriarch of. And this was their last Christmas in the family homestead. Diane's husband had passed, and she is taking it upon herself to finally treat herself and take a tour of Europe, sell the house. Her children are all grown up and moved out, and it's time for her to stretch her legs and stretch her wings. The kids have some pushback on that, but overall they somewhat embrace it. They just generally have an interesting Christmas together, one last hurrah in the house they grew up in Australia. When a stranger comes a-knocking, and this is a very unique and interesting stranger character. They aren't sure how to perceive him. He seems very odd but very gentle. He's all covered in bandages and so forth. His only explanation for that is, it keeps my skin on. They basically try and be as pleasant as possible while also trying to usher him out the door, rightly so. And then it is revealed that 20 years prior, Diane had an abortion, and the aborted fetus survived and was cared for by an anti-abortion activist that had blown up the clinic, and and was now grown up and seeking a maternal figure. And once he was treated as a stranger, being ushered out the door, maniacal homicidal instincts kicked in, and it turned into a home invasion slasher movie from there. Now, obviously, this has the subtext context of anti-abortion messaging, and this is what I mean by an identity crisis. I mean it in a number of ways, but I think this is the most surface level, apparent, not knowing what this movie was supposed to be conveying. On this channel, this is a wedge issue. This is the wedge issue, and I maintain that on this channel, for these reviews, I will be apolitical. My opinions are my own, and I will not be broadcasting them on this forum here. Regardless, I don't know exactly what this movie was trying to say. Throughout the movie, it had the Diane character providing some very strong social reasoning points for why she made the decision she did 20 years ago. It portrayed anti-abortion activists, especially the ones that would engage in violence, as bad individuals. But at the same time, it also had this massive amount of blood-filled, there is no good reason guilt to the mix. Not to mention, you literally had the aborted choice that she made come back to haunt them and kill them 20 years later. That's the whole... So, what message it was trying to convey, whether or not pro-choice, pro-life, whether it was trying to have a message at all, it kind of seemed like it was trying to, but I couldn't nail down exactly what it was. So, that's going to affect both the plot and the intent fairly equally, at least on the same level there. The plot, I gave a 7 out of 25. The most interesting thing about it for me was the characters prior to the home invasion stuff happening. Once the villain appeared on screen, the movie took a pretty downhill turn for me. And with the intent, yeah, again, I don't know what message it was trying to convey. And it seemed like it was trying to convey a strong one, whatever it was, but it just wound up getting muddled. I mean, you don't typically make abortion a central plot line of a horror movie without having a message one way or the other. So to bring it up and then walk this weird line and unbalanced on both ends, it just seemed odd to me. And then by the end of it, the credits rolled and I just didn't feel connected to anyone or anything about this movie. I think that was one of its biggest failings. You know, is it a home invasion movie where I root for the protagonist? Is this a slasher movie where I root for the villain? And, what tone is it setting? I just couldn't get a beat on it, and I felt unconnected to anybody. So when things wrapped up, I just didn't care. So yeah, plot of 7, intent of 4. I mean, they're pretty tied together on this one. As far as the acting goes, I actually give that a 17 out of 25. That's what I mean by this didn't suffer from a lot of the same ill effects of a lot of low-budget movies. This actually had some very decent acting in it. Dee Wallace playing Diane, I thought did a great job. Another standout performance was Gerard Odwyer playing her son, Jerry. I thought that he did actually a remarkable job. I thought the character that he had was very interesting, and I loved seeing him on the screen. This was well acted, and I think with a lot of low budget horror movies, that's the first thing that gets thrown out the window. You wind up getting actors that are just community theater or neighborhood friends, that kind of thing, and they just don't know how to read dialogue or say their lines properly and with any kind of natural inflection, so everything feels forced. And that wasn't the case with this one. This felt like a family, not a family that always got along, but it felt like a family, and I identified with them. But everything else about the movie just kind of fell apart from there. Even so, acting gets a decent score. The technical dips back down pretty hard, 6 out of 25. The tone of the kills was all off. I mean, this didn't just suffer from an identity crisis on a plot or intention level. This also suffered from it on the technical level, too, because you had this serious storyline, this serious family, these serious characters. And then it had this weird sense of cheeky fun with the kills that seemed very oddly out of place. A character landing on the blades of a blender with the back of his head until his eyeballs start bleeding out blood. I mean, if this was a Friday the 13th movie, that would have just been absolutely great. And there were a bunch of kills in which I could say that. There were a lot of the kills in this one. If it had been in a Halloween movie or Friday the 13th movie, I would have just been clapping and laughing and throwing popcorn at the screen. It would have been great. But in this one, it was like the equivalent of a little kid making, farty sounds with his hands. Is it funny? Absolutely. Would you be laughing if he did it at a funeral? Probably not. Seems out of place there. That's how this felt. All the kills there, although they were fun, seemed terribly out of place. For the subject matter and the characters that they were portraying here, this was a serious movie through and through, and to have that just felt wrong. So, yeah, 6 out of 25 on the technical there. It just was a bad misstep on that one. So 34 out of 100 points total. This was a very well-acted mess of a movie. And you're not going to catch me saying this a whole lot, certainly not very often, but I honestly think this movie would have been better if it had not been a horror movie. If it had taken what it started with, not introduced a slasher villain, not even introduced the anti-abortion plotline, but simply kept with the characters and the storyline that had been developed with Diane wanting to take the trip to Europe, their last Christmas in the house, the hurrah, the chemistry that the characters had with one another, how some of them didn't want her to go, how some of them were supportive of her to go, the interaction that they had with one another. One of them was pregnant and they were trying to be supportive. Another one was trying for a child and they weren't being successful. I would have loved to have seen a family dramedy that was done with just those characters and continue on from there. Have it be very dialogue based, be very kind of slow paced. I would have enjoyed that. It would have been a totally different movie, but I would have loved to have seen Red Christmas if it had simply been a Christmas family movie. But there we have it. That's my review of Red Christmas 2016. I thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. And other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.